Good morning, everyone. My name is Pam Scott, and I'm the Director of Client Services with Oasis Solutions, and I will be conducting today's year-end webinar on accounts payable and 1099s. It's hard to believe that we're already talking about year-end, but we will go through a presentation and talk about 1099 history and tracking information and how to make corrections to your history. This is not a training session on how to use Atrix, but we will talk about how to schedule an appointment for year-end assistance, and I would strongly suggest, if this is your first year for processing 1099s within Sage, that you do consider having us assist you just to make sure that you don't run into any issues and that you're able to meet the deadlines on getting everything submitted and e-filing as well. So during the presentation today, your lines are muted, but I will have you are able to submit questions through the GoToWebinar session. With what we're covering today, I will try to answer questions as I can. If there are too many questions that are submitted, then what I will do is I will follow up with you via email after the webinar today and answer those questions for you. So again, thank you for joining us today. And we're going to start with a PowerPoint. Sorry about that. And we're going to go through, and then I'll actually go into Sage and show you the areas that we're talking about. But there's some key information that we do want to talk about today. So again, we're going to focus on tracking 1099s within Sage 100. Over the years, as I talk to clients and do pre-upgrade analysis, I do find that some individuals still do 1099s outside of the system, and there really is no reason why you should have to do that. Sage handles miscellaneous interest and dividend forms for 1099s. So if you're doing one of those three types of forms, there's no reason why you cannot track that information in Sage and then actually process things at the end of the year. So what is required to process 1099s from within Sage? Well, you do have to be on a supported version. Now, if you're on a version prior to 2016, which is also the 5.30 version, let us know, and we can let you know if there will be any issues in processing them this year. Also, if you are on a version prior to 5.3, you should be getting in touch with us to start talking about doing an upgrade of your Sage 100, probably in late first quarter of 2019. So there may or may not be changes to the 1099 form as far as receiving an interim release download from Sage. We have been told by Sage that download will be available around the 19th of December. It would include any applicable changes related to 1099s and or W-2s. So once we have that information, we will make it available to our clients, and especially those of you that have already contacted us about scheduling year-end assistance. When we have those appointments with you, we will install the IRD if it's applicable. Our stance is that if the IRD is not applicable to you, we see no need in installing it at year end. Everyone is so busy and trying to get everything processed and dealing with auditors and getting your forms out. So, but we will advise you on that information. The other thing that you need in order to be able to process the 1099 forms is that Atrix e-filing and reporting must be installed on the user's workstation with sufficient permissions that allow the downloaded installation of Atrix updates. more than likely that is on your workstation and has been installed, especially if you've processed them in prior years. If for any reason you find that it is not installed, give us a call and we can take care of that for you. You also have to be current with your subscription plan with Sage in order to be able to access Atrix. If your maintenance or subscription plan has lapsed, then you will not have the ability to actually access the Atrix software. So if you feel like your plan has lapsed, then please get in touch with us and we will provide you the information on getting current with your plan. You do have to have an active internet connection on the workstation that is connecting to Atrix and processing the 1099s. And you must have your AP options in Sage set up so that it's actually tracking and capturing the 1099 payment information. And we're going to take a look at some of those screens and then also talk about issues if you find out that you should have been tracking a vendor all year, but someone didn't set it up properly, how you can go in and fix that 1099 history so that you can still process those forms during this calendar year. Now, I've spoken to several clients over the past couple of days, and many of them are not aware of a substantial change that is related to Kentucky and e-filing. Now, the information that I'm going to show you is related to W-2s and 1099s, but previously the requirement for having to mandatory e-file 1099s, I believe, was if you had more than 100 1099s. They have changed that, and now within the state of Kentucky, if you have 26 or more, either a W-2 or the 1099 forms, you are required to file electronically. That will be managed with Atrix. And so if this is something new and you've never e-filed before, that is another reason why you would want to schedule an appointment so that we can help you walk through this process. Also, as in the past few years, the deadline for getting that withholding information into the Department of Revenue is January 31st, and they are saying that no extensions are going to be granted. So you do want to make sure that you are properly preparing and scheduling so that you can get those in on a timely basis. They are also saying that if you have less than 26 forms, you are now required to submit a new form, which is called a K5, and you can submit that information electronically as well. That K5 form, they're saying, should be available by January 1st of 2019, so we're hoping that they do make that available promptly to everyone. As soon as that form is available, then Atrix will be working to add that to the list of forms that are available from within Atrix. So please take note of this. And if you have any questions about this, we can forward this information, or you can get on the ky.gov website and take a look. If you report to any other states, you would need to go to their individual sites to see if any of their requirements have changed for the 2018 reporting. If you only do the 1099s and you know that others in your company do payroll within Sage and print W-2s, you might want to make them aware of this new requirement as well. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at what you need to do in order to capture 1099 information, and it's very simple. In your Sage 100, you're going to go to your Accounts Payable setup, and in the Accounts Payable options, you're going to see on the main tab, it says 1099 reporting, and you have a checkbox. If this is checked, then it assumes you're going to want to track 1099 information, and it then opens up those fields within vendor maintenance that we'll take a look at. And then it's also showing you your default calendar year. You would want to make sure that your system says that the default calendar year is 2018, so that when you are printing that 1099 history, you're printing for the appropriate year. If for any reason you're thinking to yourself, I don't remember ever seeing in Sage where it has the 1099 information on the vendor maintenance, and you check your setting and see that this was not checked, if you want to process 1099s for this calendar year, you can go ahead and check this box, and then you can get in touch with our technical support team, and we can provide you with reports that you can run to see what once you identify the vendors that get 1099s, we can show you how to set up the information and also run payment history reports so that you can manually key in the 1099 history. So when you are looking in vendor maintenance, if you're looking at the additional tab, this is where you're going to see on the right side of your screen the 1099 information. If this little box that I'm kind of pointing to right here is blank and there's no information, you just see kind of the outline of the box, then that means you do not have the option turned on within your AP options. Once that is checked, then you have the ability to go in and set up this information. All of your vendors initially, or when you set up a new vendor, are going to be set to the vendor type of none, and it's up to you to make those changes to the information on the screen. So again, we're talking about this area right here for the 1099s, and again, I just spoke about that the vendor type defaults is none, which means they will not get a 1099. You also can say whether the vendor type is a business or an individual. So what happens is if you set the vendor type to business, it is going to ask you for their taxpayer ID. If you click the down arrow and you select individual, Sage automatically changes the header of this field to say Social Security number, and that's where you need to fill in their Social Security number. This information is pulled onto the 1099 form, so it is important that you have that filled out. If you leave off their taxpayer ID or Social Security number, when you go to do that 1099, that field is going to be blank. And then also you choose the default form, and that default form is, excuse me, you have three options. You have whether it's miscellaneous, dividends, or interest. Those are the three particular forms that are supported by Sage. Again, we talked about the taxpayer ID number or the Social Security number is filled in here. And then you have the default box number. And the default box number is what box the dollar amount needs to print on the 1099 form. When you set up a vendor from scratch, it defaults to box 1. So you need to make sure that you are putting in the appropriate box. And I'm going to show you in just a few minutes kind of how to use a cheat sheet in order to know what box to pick if you're not familiar with those. And how we're going to do that in a moment is this 1099 history button that you can see. It's a little overlaid at the moment, but that will, when you're clicking on this box, that is where you're going to go into the history and also see the boxes labeled. And then also you have the checkbox to indicate whether or not that the miscellaneous box 9 needs to be checked on the 1099 form. So now we're going to talk about the 1099 history button. And once you click on that button, this is what's going to open up. And in my demo data where I took screenshots, I had them set up as the miscellaneous form. Again, it's going to tell me what year it's looking at, and it's going back to my AP options. Now, if you're on a really old version of Sage and you have not been doing period end and year end processing in AP, and also purging and incrementing those years on your 1099 history, you do run the risk of this information being incorrect. So if it looks like what you think you paid them in 2018 is not matching up with this, with your history, please give us a call and we can certainly help you determine which numbers are correct and show you how to make those changes. So as I mentioned, if you go in and take a look at this box type, we're looking at the miscellaneous form, and it lists all of the boxes available for the miscellaneous form. If I clicked my down arrow in Sage and picked dividend, it would show me the descriptions of the dividend boxes and the applicable numbers, and the same with the interest form. So what you might find is that you initially forgot to change it and left it to the default box 1, and your information is in rent, but it really should be in box 7, which is non-employee. So we will take a look at that shortly, and we will talk about how to correct that when we get into Sage. So once you know that you have your history correct, and the other thing is you do not have to, you can cut AP checks in 2019 before you have printed your 1099 forms. There's differences with payroll and how that is managed, and we'll talk about this afternoon when we have our W-2 webinar. But you can start processing and cutting checks in 2019, and Sage will know to put that in the 2019 history versus the 2018 history. So when you are ready to print your W-2, or excuse me, your 1099s, you're going to go into Accounts Payable. You're going to go under Reports, and then you're going to see Form 1099 e-filing and reporting. And the first screen that pops up is going to ask you what form to use, what type of form you're going to be printing. And when you ask you for your form, you're going to get the option of New or History. This is in the newer versions, and History means if you are having to reprint 1099s from History versus this is the first time you're printing them and using the new form. Again, you're going to pick the form that you want to use, and this is very important. We recommend that you, this defaults to all types, which means it's going to print individuals and businesses. Leave that as it is. There's no need to change that. And then it's also going to ask you for the minimum year-to-date payment. So the requirement is, unless they've changed it, is if you've paid them more than $600 during that calendar year. So if you leave this at 0, which is fine, it's going to generate a 1099 even if you've paid somebody, $42. So you can determine if you want it only to print a 1099 for those that are required. And then also you want to make sure that your calendar year is showing 2018 on the form. You want to make sure that your company information is correct, because all of this information is going to pull onto the form when it prints. So you do want to make sure it's correct. In my information, I don't have a telephone number, but I certainly would go ahead and fill that in, and you certainly want to make sure that you have your federal ID number completed. You want to make sure that your Atrix is activated. If it says demo right here, it means it's in demo mode and you do need to activate your Atrix. It's very simple. It's pretty much just a click of a button and it will activate it and download any new applicable forms. But again, if you do run into issues with that, feel free to let us know. Okay. Um, so we're going to go over a couple of FAQs and just answer some typical questions that we get when people have not, when they're fairly new to the process. So we ask if do you have to use e-file, do you have to use Atrix to do your e-filing of your 1099s? You don't have to e-file through Atrix unless it's something that you're required to do. Again, if you have 15 1099s, you're certainly not required to e-file, but you would use Atrix to print the forms. So Atrix to print any form is free. You get into fees and processing fees when you are having them do everything. So you do need to enroll with Atrix, and it's again, enrolling with them is free, and this is the email address. If you're wanting to do e-filing with Atrix and you're wanting to know, well, how much does it cost if I do need to e-file, you can go to this website if you want to make a note of this, and it will show you their e-filing fees. The other thing that I want to mention is that the basic fees are based on a per 1099 basis. They also offer bundled options, which are would be cheaper to do those bundled options. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is a lot of our clients now are having Atrix do everything. So that means we ready the information on the 1099s. We go into Atrix and make sure all of the information is correct. And then we sign up with, or when I say we, I mean the client signs up with Atrix and has them do everything, which means they generate the 1099, they send that 1099 to your vendor for you. They submit any of the e-filing requirements, whether it's federal, state, that K-5 form that's going to be required, any of that they will do for you for a fee as well. And we're having more and more clients do that because they've determined by the time they purchase the forms, they pay for the postage, their time to get everything printed, stuff the envelopes and do that it actually in the long run costs them less to have Atrix do everything. We have not, up to this date, had any complaints from our clients about Atrix service or that they did not do things promptly. They did not do things in a timely manner. In fact, they comment about how easy it is and how much time it saved them and actually how much money it saved them in the long run. So that's something that you can consider, but it is certainly not required. You still have the ability, if you have 10 1099s you need to process, is to purchase those forms, print them free through Atrix, and then handle the distribution yourself. So a big question is what type of forms do you need to order with Atrix? And this is going to be very important if it's your first year or it's your first year on Sage. Atrix requires the blank perforated forms. You do not purchase the pre-printed 1099 forms. So you need the blank perforated 4-up packets, and this includes the red federal copy and the blank perforated recipient copy. And some of those packets also include the envelopes, so you might look and make sure that whatever you're purchasing is all-inclusive. To order those forms, you probably are going to get information or emails from Sage Software saying you can order the forms from them, which is certainly acceptable, but you do not have to purchase your forms through Sage. You can typically go to any office supply store or look online at online printers, and you should be able to purchase the forms there. So it's really up to you if you want to price shop and to see where you want to order them from. But as long as they're the blank perforated 4-up packets, then you're fine. If you want to order forms through Sage or check their pricing, their website is sagechecks.com. And if you have any issues finding that information from Sage, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be glad to assist you with that. So before we get into Sage, I wanted to kind of give everyone a reminder is that you should have received at least 2 emails from us providing information that we require appointments if you need assistance with year-end. And that could be for anything from helping you e-file, helping you print your 1099 forms, assisting you prior to year-end to make sure that all of your history is correct and everything is set up and good to go. So if you have not received an email, we've had some folks where evidently it's getting caught in their spam or their junk mail. If you haven't received anything, send me an email at pam@oasisky.com, and I will be glad to forward to you the information about what we need. And we do schedule those appointments on a first-come by first-served basis. So we already have several requests and people that we're already scheduling. If you have submitted your information to us within the past 2 days, you should be getting a call from me to schedule those appointments either sometime today, but before end of day tomorrow. And we'll get you scheduled. We'll work around your time frame and get everything taken care of. Also, I'd like for you to please note our office hours. This year, we are going to be closed on Friday, December 21st, Monday the 24th, and Tuesday the 25th. And then we will also be closed on Tuesday, January the 1st. On December 31st, we're usually here a half day to 3/4 of a day, depending on how busy support is. But we are scheduling assistance the morning of the 31st while we still have slots available. So what I'd like to do now before we get into Sage is I'd like to see if anybody has any questions to go ahead and please submit those. And it doesn't look like we have any right now, but please feel free to do that. And bear with me just a second here. And we're going to take a look very briefly at Sage. And I'm just going to go through and show you the screens that were on that PowerPoint presentation, just to kind of tie everything up. So in Accounts Payable, under Setup, you have your Accounts Payable options. And right here, as I showed you on the main tab, this is where you're going to indicate whether or not you're doing 1099 reporting and the calendar year. And this is company specific, so if you process in more than one company, you need to make sure it's set up in all of those particular companies. So when that's set up, if you go into vendor maintenance, and it takes that a second to close, bear with me just a moment. My Sage is just a little slow. And I'm just going to grab a vendor. I'm going to go to the Additional tab, and then this is where I have the Form 1099 information. Now, there's a couple of fields in the newer version that I did not have on my screenshot, so I do apologize about that. And that is electronic consent signed. If you are having Atrix email the 1099s to your vendor, you do have to get their permission to do that. And you would just check this box that they've given permission to have it electronically submitted. And then also, if they're subject to the FATCA, you would check that box as well. So looking at the vendor type, Here's where you would click your down arrow and pick either they're none, they're a business, or an individual. This one is a business, so you see where the taxpayer ID number is. I'm going to just show you, if I change this to individual, how Sage then automatically changes that field to Social Security number. So just make sure that you have it set up properly. You have the default form, so you're going to say whether this is miscellaneous, interest, or dividends. And again, you're going to have the default box. So if you look at this down arrow, you see all of these boxes, but it doesn't give you a description. And that's where I talked about you can click on this 1099 history. And then you can see all of those applicable boxes related and what their descriptions are. So you can see that box 1 is rent. You can see that what box 15A is versus box 15B. And then it shows you, based on the calendar year you have listed, what your year-to-date payments are. So this is only taking into consideration the checks that you have actually cut and posted and processed within Sage. If you have done AP invoice data entry, but have not yet paid that vendor, it is not included within this history. Again, if you have other descriptions you want to see, if I look at interest, it shows me the description and the corresponding number of the interest boxes, and the same thing for dividend. And again, if there are any changes to the 1099 form for 2018, Sage will issue that interim release download. That will be installed and automatically update this. So let's say that you have a vendor that you accidentally had forgotten to set up. What you can do is, I'm going to click accept here, and I'm going to grab another vendor. And so we'll say that this client should have been set up, and we have failed to do so. You can go ahead and set them up at this time, and make sure you select the appropriate box. I'm just going to use box 7. And then you can go into your accounts payable reports and pull up a payment history report and run it by a date range. Everything that I've paid to All Climate from January 1 through 12/31 of 2018. And then when you have that total, you can go into your 1099 history button and actually type that number in. And it's not going to mess up any history anywhere else in your system. It's not going to add this number to your payment history report. It's only going to process that when you print 1099s. So you can go in and change that information. If you realize that someone had accidentally left the default box incorrect, and when you take a look at All Climate, you realize that actually you do pay them rent and someone selected the wrong box. What you can do is change this very easily back to box 1 so that it will print properly. Go into your 1099 history, go to box 1, key in the number that should be in there, and then just literally go down and zero that out, and you've made that change. So it's very easy to fix things. If you feel like that no one has been properly tracking the 1099s and it's just too much to deal with for this year, but you would like to start fresh in 2019, again, give us a call, and we will be glad to walk you through the process and and help you get things set up so you're ready to start. So it looks like we have a question. Whoops. It looked like someone had their hand raised. If you do have a question, if you could type it into the question box, that would be great. So it looks like maybe Lorraine has a question. So Lorraine, if you do have a question, if you would please type it in the question box. And if you're unable to do that for any reason, you can feel free to email me at pam@oasisky.com, and I will be glad to address any of those questions for you. So let's wait for just a minute and see if Lorraine enters that question in. And then I'll also ask if anyone else here has questions or if there's anything that you would like for me to revisit on what we've talked about today. Okay. All right. So Lorraine is asking if you have not set up the 1099 at the beginning of the year, will you have to manually enter these at the end of the year? And the answer to that is yes. If you want to be able to print those 1099s, you will have to manually do the entry. I would go ahead and get the vendor set up. And also you want to make sure that if you are, how do I want to say this? When you are tracking 1099s on a vendor, bear with me just a second here. Okay. When you are tracking 1099 history, so we're going to pick this airway, and you do invoice data entry, it actually pulls in the invoice data entry screen what you have set up on that vendor. So if you take a look at what you've paid them through today, through December the 5th, you can key that number in, but you also want to determine if you're going to pay them anything else this year, because if you've already posted invoices, this would be showing as none. But you can do an invoice adjustment and just change the 1099 information and save it. And then once you cut a check, it will go over properly. So I know that might be a little bit confusing, but you do have to make sure that any invoices that you have that have not been paid are indicating that they do need to get a 1099. So I don't believe we have any additional questions. So I'll throw it out again to see if anybody has a question. And if not, then we'll go ahead and conclude our presentation today. Again, if you have follow-up questions, if you want to schedule appointments and you're not getting those year-end emails from us, or you need assistance with anything else related to year-end, then please feel free to email us, and we will be more than glad to help you. For those of you that do payroll, we will also have we will also have a payroll one this afternoon. I was trying to read questions and talk at the same time, and I'm not able to do that anymore. Lorraine wants to know if I can show the report that will be used to get those totals. If you go into Accounts Payable and Reports, there is a payment history report, or you can do the Accounts Payable check history report. Either one of those, you would run it by vendor. And on the payment history report, you would run it, I would run it by date instead of period in case you don't have if you're not on a calendar year, you're on a different fiscal year. And then I would run it January 1, 2018 through December 31st for whatever day you're running it 2018. And you can do it for all of the vendors. You can do it for just an equal to vendor, or if you set them up in AP showing that they do get a 1099, you can check this box right here, and then it will only print the vendors that are set up to get a 1099. So you can do either of those reports to see how much that you have paid them. And I believe that we have another request or another question. Christy is asking, how do we find out what the Atrix cost for filing is? If you go to the website, which I will pull up in just a second, it provides you with what those costs are. And if you have multiple companies or you have thousands of 1099s, you can always call Atrix and they're usually really good about giving you a bundle price. And so I will show Christy that in just a moment. And then Leslie asks, is there a preview report that they can run for previewing what 1099s will be issued? What I would do is probably run this payment history report, and it will show you. And I also believe that you can, when you go into Atrix, it will show you there also what information it is pulling in. So let me go back to that one PowerPoint for just a second. I think it's this one. So bear with me just a second. Okay. Here is the email address. If you go to this email address, it will browse out and it will give you all of their pricing structure. So, and again, if you need to e-file, then obviously there is a cost for that. If you choose to, maybe it's like you really want to have control of mailing those yourself, then to actually print the 1099s, you do it through Atrix, but it is free. So that is that information. Any other questions at the moment? Let me go back and look and make sure I didn't miss anything. Where do we get the forms to ask our vendor for consent? I do not know off the top of my head the answer to that question, but I will find out and follow up with you, Leslie. So I will find out about that, and I will follow up with an email. I do not know the answer to that right off the top of my head. Let's see if there's any other questions. Okay, I think I've answered everything. So it looks like Marie may have her hand raised. Marie, if you do have a question, if you would please type the question in, and I will be glad to answer that for you. And we'll give Marie just a moment. If she doesn't submit the question, then Marie, you can always reach out to Pam at oasisky.com, and I will be glad to answer any questions that you may have. So let me look and see if she submitted anything. Okay, I'm not seeing that any other questions have been submitted. So we'll go ahead and end this session for today. We will be having another presentation of 1099 processing. It's basically the same presentation will be happening next Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. So if you have other employees that would like to attend, please feel free to have them sign up. And this afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern, we will be having our presentation on talking about payroll and W-2s and how to create those historical companies and get your data copied over. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. And again, my email address is pam@oasisky.com. And I'm glad to answer any additional questions. And I will follow up with you, Leslie, on where to get the form to get permission to file electronically. So thank you all very much, and I appreciate your time today. Thank you.